Hello and welcome to Nerdicy. For nerds, by nerds. I'm Nerdicy Steve, and today I'm joined with by Douglas Cole. Which you know what? Someone didn't put your name in. Curse
Oops.
them. By someone, I mean me. We've been chatting away here, and we'll fix that. If you could be so kind to introduce yourself.
I will.
And
My name's Douglas Cole. I am gaming Ballistic. I'm a publisher of role-playing games. I've done a little bit of 5e and OSR stuff, and then starting really in 2018, I got a couple of licenses to support Steve Jackson Games products, including the Dungeon Fantasy role-playing game and the Fantasy Trip. And I've been doing a lot of that over the last couple of years, and right now, I'm hopefully meeting a need for a giant book of monsters for the Dungeon Fantasy role playing game. There are monsters in the Dungeon Fantasy role playing game. There are monsters here and there in GURPS. A surprisingly awesome source of monsters in GURPS is GURPS Horror for fourth edition by the inimitable Ken Hite. But people don't think of that as a bestiary, and it's really not a monster catalog. It is a list of horrible things and what monsters can be used to represent those horrible things. But what you don't have is a giant book similar to the D&D Monster Manual, where you could be playing an adventure or let's say a systemless adventure and says, oh, six skeletons come out. It's a bad example because skeletons are actually in the main book, but six ogres come out to try and kill you. Oh, gee, I don't have an ogre right in front of me. And so where can I just open a monster manual and go get stats, or do I have to stop the game and make the stats?
it, yeah, it seems like a bit of a miss that people aren't making monster books. Also, they tend to do really well. Like they tend to do better than most other types of products just because people like monsters. Like
I think so. I mean, people do like monsters, and what I'm trying to do with this first monster book for my Nordland setting is make it so that a resource for common but flavorful creatures with existing stats exists for the GURPS fantasy community. Purely public service, taking one for the team, blah blah blah.
yeah.
But I think it's a need, and I know that I've missed it, and it would be awfully handy to be able to pull adventures from other games off the shelf or just wing it, right? If you're fighting something or your players do something and you're like, oh, well, uh, we've actually aggravated a bunch of humanoid bandits. Well, it'd be kind of nice to have some bandits ready to go. I did a product called Character Collections for the Fantasy Trip, which was actually 4 books that collectively had well over 200 personalities in them. And being able to just say, yeah, that guy or that girl, and have the antagonist that you're interacting with or the non-player character that you interact with have a little bit of personality and a different set of wants and needs rather than bandit number 3 is handy. And to some extent, I'll start down that pathway a little bit in the bestiary, the Nordlander Oveneboken, which is Nordland Bestiary and really Nordland Enemies book. And is the literal translation from my bad Google Icelandic. Yeah, I mean, everyone should like a big list of monsters, and it's going to start with 128 pages, and if we fund, that'll be where it is. But then every $4,000 beyond that is an extra 16 pages of monsters.
We got a little ball breaking going in the chat already. Starting early. That's fine. I bring people on here to talk. I'm all about it. So yeah, I feel like we get like two different things from having, monster books, right? One is like you said, you need a thing and you don't have it, so you have to, stop and create it or make it up as you go. So just having it is nice, but then like two other things you get from it is one, when you have a monster book with lure and story, it inspires us as GMs and game masters, and kind of captures our imagination. It might even take our stories in different directions because we didn't think of a thing until we saw that. And the other thing is, like, maybe you don't need that monster, but that stat block is perfect for something else, and you can
Right.
reskin it, and and it expands like the tools in your toolbox.
And one of the things that I really wanted to do with this is this is a very art heavy book. Every creature has an illustration. It may be a custom, bespoke, custom commission. Um, some of my monsters come from various products that I've done before, and if there are suitable illustrations, I will use those. If it's a suitable illustration from early on in my publishing career, uh, some of these artists that I've worked with since the beginning that I started, and they've gotten better. Like
Yeah.
the my Ettercop is light years ahead of some of the basic goblinoid characters that I had in my first Hall of Judgment adventure. And so I really want Juan Ochoa, who did those things, to be able to go back and apply new skill to those things. And the book will be better for it. Um, so, yeah, it's going to be lavishly illustrated, and I've got a little gimmick, I guess you could call it, is that most of these monsters will appear in front of uh, Ilva, who is my 5'9" barbarian Viking, and she is my scale model. So I have a silhouette, transparent silhouette of Ilva to provide scale to each creature. So is this a gremlin that is waist high, or is this a troll that's twice as tall as you are?
Do you have a a method to your madness when creating monsters?
It's going to depend on what I'm doing. When I'm creating beasts or transferring beasts from reality to the book, what I want to do is look for interesting things that people might not know about these creatures, and I consult with people who are experts in those things. Um, and like, for example, I did not know that if you grab a badger, it can actually turn around inside its own skin. Most people probably do not know that the whole alpha male wolf, alpha dog, alpha wolf thing
Is not
uh,
real.
is not real. It was an artifact of
Uh,
too many wolves from different families being artificially confined, and the gentleman who originally wrote the paper has been trying to kill that
he went on a crusade,
theory.
but people liked it too much, and he couldn't
You can't
make
get
it
rid
go
of it. That's
away.
right.
Yeah.
So I get to drop in a line in there that says, these are parents and their puppies,
Uh,
and try and deal with that a little bit. I didn't know that the golden eagle is almost as fast as the peregrine falcon. It's been clocked at like 160, 200 miles an hour in a dive. That's a whole lot of eagle dropping on your face. Um, and
Peregrine,
so
that's
there's
the one that just punches things and breaks their necks, right?
I think so, yeah, but it's the one that's been clocked at over 200 miles an hour
Yeah, they don't
in a
even
stoop.
use their claws; they just make a fist and.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, so that's beasts, and I think that beasts are really important. One of the interesting things about some games is that some games go pretty far out of their way to make the hard part about cross country travel, which is water and food and the elements, right? If you're trying to travel 1,000 miles cross country without magic, that's a job and a half. That's hard, right? You have died of dysentery, right? It's the classic thing,
Yeah.
or from Oregon Trail. And so there's magic and there's this and whatever. But not all games have the magic, and sometimes finding the water and carrying the food and going hunting for the food is important. And predators mostly aren't threats to a typical dungeon delving party. There's a line in a recent update that says, "Here's some of the monsters that will appear in the first 128 pages," um, and it says, well, you know, wolves or whatever will usually get parried to death by adventurers, because one of the tricks about the GURPS is that the wolf attacks you, and if you parry it with a weapon, you can damage the wolf. So you never actually have to attack it. It tries to bite you. You stick a sword in its face. It bites the sword. It doesn't like that a ton, and it wounds itself. Um, but what predators are really good for is killing your pack animals or scaring them away, and that can lead to other encounters as the horse runs away and runs into a troll nest or something like that. And so, or oh look, a third of our water supply just fell down a freaking cliff. That's a problem in many games where now so if you've got a desert or brackish water, or you're I've been starting to rewatch the Wheel of Time or watch the Wheel of Time. So if you're up in the blight where you can't eat the food and you can't drink the water, and a blight zone is a common feature of many terrain types, having your supplies go away. Oh, my magic sword was strapped to my horse, which is now 1,000 feet vertically down that cliff. Oops. So stuff like that makes beasts, both predator and prey, more interesting, and that's even before you get to the actual monsters, figments of horror, and the Etterkop that Brian in the question is alluding to, and bipedal creepy spiders. Etterkop is Dutch for spider. I did not know that until a week ago. So the Etterkop, is really just a bipedal spider, spider dude. Anyway, so and so creepy things like that are a staple of fantasy role playing game, and they're fun, and gotta have them. And so there's a bunch of those, and if we unlock some stretch goals, I get to codify some dinosaurs, because who doesn't like dinosaurs? Except I'm giving all my dinosaurs powers. So so our T-Rex is a pyromaniac. Our ankylosaur likes to eat magic items. It's drawn to magic items and finds them tasty. And it is a giant armored beast. I don't know if you've ever seen a scale thing of an ankylosaur. They're big. Although up until like a year ago, I pronounced it ankylosaurus. But apparently it's ankylosaur. So, these are the things I learned. But yeah, in any case, I've got actually, I wrote a ton of stuff on horses, and consulted an expert on horses in order to simplify it down to, these kind of horses require 2/3 the food of these other kinds. And when food and water is so heavy, that makes a big difference. Or, where the phrase stubborn as a mule means something. If a mule decides it's not going to cross a river, it's not going to cross a river. There's some famous stories in both medieval and 18th and 19th century history, where military expeditions were brought to a halt because the mules just wouldn't move.
Yeah, donkeys. I know, not a mule, but donkeys are no joke.
Right.
like I didn't know, but they'll you'll keep donkeys not only for what they do, but they also tend to protect the other animals.
Right.
Not intentionally, but because they just don't
They're
like
just ornery, yeah.
and wolves or whatever. So.
Yeah, no, and I hear the same thing about mules, is that they're intelligent, stubborn,
Yeah.
but they're very hardy, and they can be as large as the smaller horses. And so they're fantastic pack animals, which is why they're used.
So
yeah.
So how long have you been working on your monster book?
So that is an excellent question. The monster book that I'm publishing for the Dungeon Fantasy role playing game started out as a almost complete conversion of the SRD to my Dragon Heresy role-playing game, which is 5e but modified. It's got some very GURPSy elements to it. You separate wounds versus vigor, so that even a 20th level barbarian can get killed by a chop to the neck with an axe, regardless of how many vigor he has, which is kind of hit points. If he's not paying attention, a chop to the axe goes right to wounds and can kill this the poor schlep. Anyway, but I wrote like 130,000 words of fluff text because the SRD allows stats, really, but it's just stats, and so you have to write your own fluff text, and so I did. And I researched the heck out of it, like we've been discussing, and all that good stuff. So I have that, and that started in 2016 or so, right as I was setting my eyes on maybe publishing some things. And then in 2020, after I had done a bunch of publishing with GURPS and the Fantasy Trip, I approached Steve Jackson Games. I said, hey, what if I do a big bestiary? And they're like, well, the reason we've avoided big bestiaries like that is they tend to be pretty setting dependent. I was like, well, conveniently enough, I have a setting. And then they're like, yeah, go for it. And I was like, okay. So I planned an equally large tome, 130,000 words, turns into about 260, 250 pages or so. And maybe more, maybe less, whatever. But it turns into a pretty solid book. I'm like, well, I've got all this started, so let's GURPSify it. And so that's kind of what I've been doing, except 2020 hit, and that was unpleasant, and that delayed some things that and a few other bits. But in any case, now here it is at the end of 2021, and I had promised that I would get a bestiary out into the wind this year, and so here it is.
So, heresy, Dragon Heresy, is very like Scandinavian and
Yes.
Viking themed. So, are your monsters likewise?
Yes. Short answer is yes. A lot of them have different names. So I have an ice centipede, which is called an Ismarg Fatler, which is a Remmerhaz. Um, and so I've renamed them. I've got the fluff text is based on my cosmology a bit more. And so you've got the 9 realms, and the demons and devils or whatever. It's just really demons in the Dungeon Fantasy role-playing game come from Muspelheim, the plane of fire. You've got the fairy, the Alfar, who come from Alfheim. And really it's taking the characteristics of the creature that you want to emphasize, and wrapping the powers and abilities around them. And one of the fun things is saying, okay, well, if like coming back to the Ettercop, just because Brian in the chat says that he's got an adventure planned around those guys. So these guys are bipedal spiders, and they kind of lay waste to an ecosystem. They cover the entire thing with webs, and they're not really they're more of like of locusts, right? They come in and they blight the land and destroy things. And so in that particular case, it is the equivalent of a wasting disease that 4 to 6 stalwart adventurers can fight, right? They can be the hero that, it's not just a plague or a blight on the land. It is something that you can go fight and deal with, and you give the characters agency to go solve this problem, rather than just suffer and die, which is nice. That's the point of an adventure, is to go do things. So from that perspective, it's like, you can look to folklore and fairy tales and stuff like that in order to figure out what were people afraid of, and that becomes both the creature and the plot line associated with it.
Did you discover any new favorites?
Yeah, yeah, let me look at my art board. I got really fond of my trolls. We got five or four different kinds of trolls. Fiala troll, which is a mountain troll, a Grendelkin, which Beowulf is familiar with, a Stoth troll, which is like a Stoth means like misshapen or twisted, and they were twisted around by the Tomta, the dark gnomes, in as part of an adventure. But these guys are the regenerating trolls. And then there's the Thurs, which just means strong, and they're just the brute, almost basically a fairy equivalent of an ogre. So those guys are fun. I really like the Benedirith, the praying beast. Praying is basically a praying mantis demon. I believe, trying to remember what kind of the derivation. That one actually, I think there might have been an SRD demon that was insectoid and spiky and stuff, but it's hard to say because some of these things drift. And it started one way, and then I sent it out, and the artist came back with an image that was simply better than what I had in mind, and so now the monster is morphing.
I'm familiar with that experience.
Right, exactly. I got so there's stuff like that where the art team comes back with something really cool, and you're like, yeah, I don't care what the original description was. That's too cool to not use.
So Brian wants to know, I love creatures with lore. Any tips on applying lore to inform a new creature or how a new creature would act in RP situation? Seems like a nice way to get more miles out of them.
I think that's true. Part of it is the same advice about making interesting foes in general. Figure out what they want. And, I'm not talking necessarily in a method acting way. If you have a hag that preys on, it takes your dreams, the original nightmare, a wild spectral horse that would ride, or you would ride it through your dreams and it would terrify you. Okay, so what does it want? What is it doing? It feeds on dreams. It feeds on fear. So what's it going to do? It's going to come into a village, maybe, and is it going to just scare one person? Well, where's the fun in that? Right? So it's going to go from person to person, and they're all going to be scared. They're going to be scared of everything. They're going to be jumping at shadows. And so you walk forward with
just
this.
reskin a modern day politician.
Yeah, no, that's fair. But I mean, you walk forward with this, and you get to a place where the village, everyone wants to kill each other, and no one trusts each other, and a dark time has come to the Grenvald. And then you back it up, and you have this thing where, well, you're going to walk into this, and there's a feud or there's an argument, and you're initially going to find, oh, well, this must be the people. Who's at fault? And eventually you'll find out that no one is. It's one or more night hags who are messing with people's dreams or whatever. And one of my monsters from Citadel at Nordvorn is a succubus, really. In my lore, it's called a Falagligi. Falagligi means beautiful lie. And it's the beautiful lie that you want to fall for. But it goes out of the way that it's not just what you might call a bone demon. That's not it. It's the temptation. It's the betrayal of self that causes you to lose your soul, and pick up, in GURPS terms, disadvantages, and eventually you'll fail a roll, and she eats your soul, and you're a husk of a person. And so that obviously, right, is you can have a succubus incubus interaction with these phaleglegli that has nothing to do with nudity and lust. Although that's going to be pretty common, but you could have one who's a good cook, and the star athlete of the village, the one who wins the really important foot race, has turned into just a glutton because it's been led down the pathway not of boobs and loincloths and chainmail bikinis, but too much food or whatever, right? I mean, any
It's a
kind of
nice twist
betrayal of
on an
right. So
old trope.
it's
Yeah.
something yeah. And then Brian was asking about the Glabrezu, and the Glabrezu is renamed the Krabari, the crab demon in this, and that one is a 2-page write-up in the book Hall of Judgment, and it will absolutely reappear in the monster manual. I will need Juan to do a different art because I'm trying to most of the new art does not have backgrounds, so that it fits better on the page, and some of these write-ups are very big, but the Glabrezu is really interesting because it can transform itself, and although it's this giant pincer demon that's a great fighter and all, it's actually a long-term planner. Like, it'll summon a bunch of phaleglegli to a village and start a demon cult worshiping it. And you're going to approach this demon leader and you go, oh, I'm going to kill you, and it's going to be right, and I'm actually shapeshifted into a mighty crab demon or whatever. And it has a really cool mind control thing where it'll attack the weakest will of the group and make it go berserk, and it's the being who's afflicted by this believes that something is about to attack their friends, and so it swings a blade at it, but it's not actually there, and so basically it starts to lay waste. You've got your and as it happens, it's frequently the case where the one with 9 attacks and strength 94 also has will 7. So the barbarian is always a great target. The berserking barbarian is always a great target for the mind influencing skills.
Bring out our anti-barbarian unit.
That's right. But that's the kind of thing that you get to do. I don't know that that's advice per se. It's more examples of what I've done. But what I would probably do is Ken Height's Horror for 4th edition. The GURPS book, but it's, as is always the case with Ken Height, it's very well researched. So this one, the hardcover, but if you look at it, the table of contents is not a list of creatures, it's a list of fear, right? Fear of the universe, fear of starvation, fear of madness, fear of mutilation, fear of taint, fear of sex, fear of disease, right? So here are the fears, and here are the creatures that grew up around those fears. Here are the stories people would tell. And here are the stories that people would tell about demons and creatures that would prey on these fears. So Ken has done a remarkable job in codifying this stuff, and that's a great place to start.
Have you discovered like a favorite resource for researching monsters without just generically saying the internet, obviously?
Folklore is great. Pull out the Grimm fairy tales. That's where a lot of you're going to the Hans Christian Andersen stuff. I mean, a lot of the Little Mermaid twisted just a little bit is a sea hag or a siren or a marrow. That's not a happy, fun tale. I mean, Disney made it happy and fun, but the Little Mermaid original story is horrible. She can't.
I feel like most of those stories are like that, though, right?
Right. But you don't have to go too far to find some pretty scary stuff. And going to the original source material. Go to the Bible, right? Revelations is not exactly a happy, fun time either. Plague of Locusts, and all that stuff, right? So there are places that you can go and read to explore that. Actually, you really want to go fun do it. Look up the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistics Manual for Psychology, mental illness, and use that as inspiration for horrible things.
There is no end of inspiration. I've gotten some inspiration from the weirdest places. What is one of the weirdest places that you've come up with like a new monster?
Oh, like where have I thought of one?
Yeah.
Um, really, I think probably it's more like at the breakfast table with my 7-year-old, because they don't have any preconceptions about reality and stuff. And so, well, what if this, that, and the other thing? I'm like, well, that's horrible. Let me write that down.
Yeah. I mean, like, I guess one of my favorites is we did a variant on harpies.
hmm,
And we have a junkyard harpy. And there used to be this these two brothers that had a talk show called Car Talk. I'm not even into
yeah, no, I
cars.
remember Car Talk. Yeah,
I'm not even into cars. I just used to like to listen to those guys. I don't know why. And they were just like talking to a person about, going to the junkyard and getting something. And I'm just like, don't let those junkyard harpies get to you. And I was like, oh, that needs to be a thing. So we have these harpies that instead of luring people in with their song, they animate things, junk with it instead.
sure, sure. Yeah, as I look, I've got at least 4 different variants of the creature underneath the waters, right? I've got the fish folk, the Hafith folk, the mermaids. I've got Merrow. There's a sea hag, and there is a Nixie. All of them are similar description enough that an adventuring party can approach them and not exactly know which way the encounter is going to go. Right? Some of them give it away because they're just like twisted and evil, and you can just see it.
Yeah.
But a mermaid, a sea hag, and a Nixie all can look like beautiful women from the waist up with an eel or a fish tail, and one of them is just a perfectly cool, civilized whatever, and the other two are either going to try and bring you under the water and marry you, or whatever. A bard seeks them out to learn the songs. But yeah. Anyway, so that's that.
That actually sounds like a cool idea for an adventure. The
Right.
bard
I mean,
seeking a siren to learn their song.
well, and that's the legends of the Nixies in Scandinavian folklore. People would seek them out to learn how they could sing so beautifully. So that's something where you only need one person to do that and get away, and
Yeah.
then it's the legend. And I was made a famous bard by seeking out a Nixie, and my music and my instruments were so fine that I was able to escape with my life after learning this.
That damn Nixie propaganda. They let
Yeah,
one
that's
go
right.
every once in a while, after teaching them just so they can
Right.
lure more
Or
in.
was the bard lying? Is that a convenient way to get rid of one of aspiring uh, competitors?
Oh,
Um,
that would be a great plot twist. Been like, oh yeah, I learned to sing so well from studying by the sirens.
right,
You can convince them. You just need to do X.
right.
And he's been, all along the bars has been sending their competitors off to
To a
drown.
watery grave. That's right.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so there's all sorts of stuff. One of the questions that popped up is do I have any like monsters like the tarasque, right? Something that's basically a moving island. I think that's an option for some of the stuff. Some of my my worms, my lindorms can get very, very large. Um, I the dungeon fantasy role playing game does not inherently have built into it mass combat, or GURPS has a mass combat system. Dungeon fantasy role playing game does not. And they are different product lines. And so in my support of the Dungeon Fantasy role playing game tends to deal more with people scale things. Something that requires an army to conquer is less a monster than a plot device. And you can tell great plots around it, and great stories around such a thing. But it's it's a force of nature, right? I'm going to go do battle with the hurricane. Okay,
Yeah.
you do that. So that's not really where this book is focused. That being said, I could see a future expansion or a supplement or a next volume or something that was nothing but epic level plot device level challenges for, all right, you've pissed the GM off now. And one of them is actually alluded to in Kyle Norton's Dragons of Rosgarth. It actually sets up an epic level challenge, but we haven't dealt with it yet.
So, do you ever think you'll recreate this book for 5e?
Yes, I won't beat around the bush. Yes,
Because that was that
do
was kind
think
of like
that.
the genesis, right? That would be going
It,
back full
it
circle.
it was, and the cost of doing monster manuals is mostly in the art, and I want to revitalize my Dragon Heresy. I'd say line, but it's only 2 products. I'd like to expand it from level 1 through 5 to level 6 through 11. I've got a lot of character backgrounds that I built that are kind of archetypes. I didn't include all of the classes in the Dragon Heresy introductory set. I could do that. More spells, right? Bringing bringing it up to the mid level. And then just here's a giant old big book of monsters. And let's face it, those are written, right? I mean, I've got the D&D version of all that. That was that 130,000 words. But I had like 325 backers for the
Yeah.
Dragon Heresy book, and that's not something that you run out and start writing 250-page books to support.
I feel like if you kind of rebrand a little bit as Viking themed monsters, that it might do better, and lean less in the Dragon Heresy and more into the kind of what inspired it to begin with.
That could be. That could be. Yeah.
Well, so
But I've got 1,200 Dragon Heresy books in a warehouse in Tennessee, so I do have an interest in moving some of those.
yeah, there you go. Compare them together. So Brian wants to know: do you suggest any setting-specific items, loot particular monsters might be carrying?
That is an excellent. So no, not yet. However, I want to follow this book on with a book called Loot the Bodies. And there's actually loot the corpses is actually a very pithy phrase in Icelandic. That's basically a book of what do you do with the dead monster bits? What are they usually carrying? Are there alchemical things? Which monsters are boring because they're just animals and they don't collect anything interesting? Which of them are going to kill adventurers and drag them in their gear back to their lair? Which of them are you just going to say, oh, I ran across an angry bear and it killed my brother and it left the brother in the woods and it didn't drag a +2 magic sword back to its cave because why would it?
Yeah.
That's not what bears do. But yeah, no, I want to do that as a sequel. Mostly because I think that would be a fun separate product. And then I know that the other thing that I want to do is encourage my authors and my future things to use this bestiary to generate setting and adventure specific encounter tables. I was asked, is the bestiary going to be full of encounter tables? And my answer is no. It's not, because it is impossible to cover all the situations. And I would rather have, I am doing this particular adventure, crossing this particular land, and here are the creatures that you're going to run into, not some random thing from a 240-page book. So I did a bunch of random encounter tables in actually, I think 3 of the adventures that I have: the Hall of Judgment, Forest, and Dragons of Rosgarth, each have sort of roll 1D, and cross reference and stuff like that. And there's some encounters for that sort of thing that are very specific to the region that they're in and the adventure type and stuff like that.
So I see behind you, you have a shield. Is that one of the ones you've made?
It is.
You, now we talked a little bit before we started, but I know in the past you've done like I guess it's a Viking like combat school, which real life has been getting in your way lately. But you
That
were
is true.
also making shields as well. Do you still make shields?
I do, actually. I made I had a kid who was a young man who was in that school, and really enjoying it, and he wanted a shield that was built to his size and specs and whatever. And he was 5'10", but he's probably going to grow to be 6'2". And so he needs a 36-inch diameter shield. He needs a big shield. So I built one for him, and it wound up being about 7.5 pounds. And it was, put together with hide glue and 30-year-old poplar wood and animal hide, like mine was. But he's a Star Wars fan, and so we painted the whole thing black with a giant Boba Fett red skull on it. So we called it Boba Shield.
Nice.
Yeah. So yeah, that took. I built that in about a week. And that one turned out relatively well. He likes it, so that's all that matters.
So I don't know if this is accurate. You would know better than I, but I thought I read like oftentimes like if there was like a duel,
Yeah.
oftentimes like they'd go through like multiple shields
So
because they would like shatter.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, certainly you were allowed up to 3 shields in a home gun. However, I don't know if those were hide covered. These shields are quite robust, and the way that we are using them is not hold it in front of you and let somebody beat on it. You present it. All right. So you don't hold it like this. You hold it like this. So you really can't see most of me, right? You can't see my head. You can't see down to my knee. It's out there. So in order to strike my body, you have to get past this defense, and it's very thin, right? This matches the historical finds pretty well. And so I, and Thran Godfrey has done some interesting experiments, as has Werner Vinge and Rolf Warming and Roland Warzeka and Arthur von Eschen, people, some of whom I've met, some of whom I've not. But they're robust. I mean, you can swing a Dane axe at these guys, and because of the hide, it doesn't shatter. It will dent, right? I mean, or it'll the axe may penetrate through, and arrows will penetrate through some. But as thin as that is, it's pretty robust, even up to 70 or 100-pound bow. So, it's hard to say what that was all about. And a lot of those stories were written down hundreds of years after the event. So it's hard to say. There's not a ton of this is exactly what happened. That was, they call it the Dark Ages because people didn't write stuff down. Anyway, but yeah, so, and then the swords here are of my own make as well. This is just your typical wooden training sword. Weighs about a pound or so. But this one is weighted. So this one has a balance point about where an historical sword would be. Weighs 2.45 pounds. So it weighs as much as an historical sword would be because it's got metal. I've laminated metal into the. So that's instead of paying as much as $1,000 or $600 for a steel trainer, I sell the wooden training swords with metal embedded in them for people to build up their wrist strength and have the right. Because the problem with an all wood training sword is, though, while it teaches grip and stuff, the balance tends to be way out.
There's also another problem, right? Like the thing that I guess like I didn't know this, and I think the thing that most people probably don't expect is the flex of metal compared to like wood doesn't flex like that.
It doesn't. The other thing that wood doesn't do, especially blunt wood or even blunt steel, is the edge binding that you get sword on sword, is a very different feeling than wood sliding over wood or even
Yeah.
blunt steel sliding over blunt steel. So yeah, there are resonance differences in how the weapons behave, but mostly, you don't do that,
Uh-huh.
right? A sword is a labor saving device, to borrow a line from Roland. I don't need to wind up and take a running blow to kill a man. Armor worked, and so if I was going to play can opener, I needed a poleaxe or a halberd or something with a lot of oomph to it. Swords were versatile, and the way that I would kill a person in armor is I would grab it in two hands and half sword and stab them somewhere vulnerable. Not, oh, I'm going to punch through. And from that perspective, the D&D armor class thing, where all hits do the same damage if you can bypass armor, has some merit to it. It's abstract, but if I'm going to hurt you through armor, I'm usually not going through the armor. There are limited exceptions.
Yeah.
A
So
spear will go a spear will go through lower quality mail, but some mail would turn a spear.
my partner Ted, he's just trying to get back into Arma and sword training, and most of what I know is like from him doing that, like in the like you said about them half swording, but also like I didn't know they would turn the sword around and use it like a hammer to
Yeah.
screw up the joints and immobilize their targets.
Yeah. The murder stroke, the Mordhau, is remarkably effective. And you can grip a sword blade, especially if you have gloves on. You can grip a sword blade by the sharp end, and use it as a hammer. It's not something that you're not going to want to push on it, right? And you definitely
Yeah.
don't want to slide. But it's effective, and some of the bashing on people, like some of our demonstrations. I have a mail shirt that I wear to train, mostly just for the exercise, right? I'm not too worried about getting hit. But for our demos, we'll do a thing where you flick a sword blade at one of these shields and it embeds in the edge of the shield, and it sticks. And it sticks even more with old growth wood and a properly made shield with 100-year-old trees and stuff. And then once it sticks there, you twist it and you disarm the guy. But after we do this demo and say, this is why you don't just swing at the shield, because you may get your sword stuck and then taken away from you. I'll be standing there having holding because I was holding the shield, and who was ever swinging the sword will, in the middle of telling the story about shields and this and blah blah blah, will swing their sword to hit me right across the chest, and it's a sharp sword. But I don't worry about it, and I don't have a gambeson on. I don't need to worry about it because the mail stops it.
Yeah, I mean
So
a
yeah,
lot of the weapon designs, it's like
right.
it's the arms race, right? The engineering
A
things to
bit.
get to you get get through that. Things to break links and things to you really like pummel the person more than stabbing them. Like an
There,
armored
there,
knight.
there,
the key was to get them on the ground and stab them, right?
There was a lot of grappling in some of those armored fighting systems, and you'd wrestle and you'd hook with the sword or with your stick and then use that as a lever to throw and stuff like
Or
that.
actually, I think the real purpose wasn't to kill them, was to capture them because you could make a lot of money.
A lot of money ransoming, ransom the gear, ransom the person. Yeah, there was a lot of that.
They're worth way more
Right.
alive than dead.
Right.
So Chad does have a question about the project. Are the monsters categorized in such a way that you can know which type of lore skill will know about them?
That is they are categorized by the type. I think some more directed information about the various lore skills would be useful, and that would be a good addition to the book. Some of the text up front needs to be written and expanded. So I think, yes, there will be more. It won't be directly applicable to 5e games, but my 5e book, Old Monster Manual, had a box in it that I don't know if it made it into Dragon Heresy, called Identify Fiend or Foe. And it broke down the kind of things that each of the 5th edition skills was useful for.
Nice. Always useful. I guess like in 3rd edition they started doing that, or was it 4th edition? Maybe it was 4th edition D&D, where they like every monster had a lure block with it with the DC, which I do miss that a little bit. Especially maybe for newer GMs, it makes it really easy because players always want to be like, "Hey, I have this skill. Can I use this?"
Right.
And that probably transcends all genres and games if they have some kind of skill system.
Right. And I think a way to prevent that from just being like, how do I insta-kill the challenge that the GM has put in front of me? If you encounter a creature in the wild, the difficulty levels are going to go up because you're trying to remember key bits and communicate them in the heat of combat. Whereas if you suspect that a Grendelkin is plaguing the outlying areas, you can do research and say, oh, yes, weapons are not going to be very effective. We're going to have to grapple this thing into submission and then burn it or whatever.
And then there was another question by Parks. If you add layers of silk to the shield, would they stop arrows better? Kind of like samurai armor.
I would. Silk is pretty cool. I think silk is not Kevlar. Although Kevlar isn't terribly good about arrows either. I don't know
anything stabbing is ballistics.
I don't know to the extent to which the arrow repelling and it goes in with you and it is a fiber and a sharp arrowhead will cut it. I would need to understand if the myth or the legend of silk stopping arrows that way, how well grounded that is.
I don't think it worked at all. They're just like in feudal Japan. They're just like, metal's really expensive, guys. You just need silk. You'll be fine.
Anyway, but yeah, the silk is good stuff. It's light, it's cool, it's breathable, and you wear it when you can. And there's actually a great a collection of unmitigated pretentiousness. Acoop did a wonderful series on horse nomads, and they talk about the utility of silk and clothing and how it's can be warm, it can be cool, and that was very handy in the kind of climates that you had to deal with. I would not I would not underestimate the toughness of animal hide, however. The calf hide that I have on the shield is 0.5 millimeter thick on each facing, and it's very tough. And that is not terribly thick hide either.
Do you try and stick to like what you believe how they historically did things, or do you just kind of keep the, I guess
if I deviate from what we believe, I can't use it in class.
Okay.
So Arthur has been researching shields for a long time.
No room for innovation.
Yeah, there's some of that. It's like Yes, things were done in later periods, but he is putting brackets around the period that he's teaching and of interest. Did eventually Viking fighting or whatever, did it eventually morph into sword and buckler and 133? And it did. We have those manuals. We know what that looked like, and stuff like that. But that's not the time period that he's trying to emulate. So, like, for example, the mail that I wear, I was like, oh, I want to get some wedge riveted chainmail because it's stronger and lighter and blah. He's like, no, you want to do dome riveted because it's not as good, but that's the mail that we found. Okay, right? Well, I want a titanium shirt because it's lighter and I don't have to take care of it. Yeah, no. That's not where we're going with this. So yeah, so it's there. He's got some restrictions.
Rules lawyers, they're in every genre, in every
That's
hobby.
right. That's right.
There's no defeating it. So how often are you making shields nowadays?
Rarely. They're $500 a piece.
How long does that take?
About a week.
Yeah, that's okay. It's not a great profit margin for a week's
worth.
No,
it's not. I have a lot of the materials because I bought them 10 shields worth at a time, and I cut down a tree. My father-in-law and I cut down some of his 35-year-old poplar trees and got those quarters on so that I have wood. So I've got most of the stuff. It's not. It's the kind of thing where making one shield takes a week. Making 4 shields takes a week.
Okay.
Because
so you can kind of batch it.
You lay it out, right? If I lay out 3 foot by 3 foot, or actually 40-inch by 40-inch square of wood, you lay it out. I have enough clamps to do 2 or 3 at once. So I could do 3 shield blanks, and you lay them out, and then you have to wait a day. And then the next day you cut and trim and sand and smooth and all that. And you can probably do 3 of those in a day. And then the next day you lay up the hide, and that takes a day, right? So there's a lot of sit and wait that you just can't hurry if you don't want the shield to die.
Now, do you have to use a specific type of hide? Will any kind of hide do? Like, I've talked to leather workers that have been able, like, they source their hide from, like, I guess it's like cattle ranchers or whatever that are just going to throw it away.
Right. So in my particular case, because the hide on some of the period finds is pretty thin, like you can see on my shield behind me, you can see the wood through the hide. It's that thin. It's parchment thick. It's about 500 microns.
Oh, I didn't realize there was hide.
Yeah, no, that's hide covered on both sides.
Yeah.
But so mine is pretty thin. I get it for the same stuff that they make large drum heads out of. I've seen other hides use. Sometimes what they'll do is well, some of them will patch hides. Like goat hide is of the right thickness, although they don't really think that the hides that they found have been goat. I use goat hide for my edging, the band that goes around the edge. Anyway, long story less long is you can use a lot of hide, but it gets heavy. I mean, this is a 6-pound shield, and holding it out like I demonstrated earlier gets heavy. So the style that we think is more practical for the kind of fighting that they want to do requires a lighter shield, and so you want the thinner hide.
What do you think about fighting with 2 shields?
I think that I would rather have something pointy in my other hand.
Thank you. Because we always get like requests for those builds and like just use 2 shields, and I'm like, no, there's a reason why no one ever did that ever.
Shields the size of the one that I have are awkward.
Yeah.
So they get in the way of each other, and actually it takes some training to avoid your own shield with your own weapon. But we also, I don't want to get too far into it. This is a game talk, and we're coming to the end. I do try and inform. I'm going to steer this back to I do try and, to some extent, inform what I'm doing with as much basis as I can. But it is a fantasy role playing game, and in the end, it's about wacky fun.
Yeah.
So it just needs to be not unbelievable, and it needs to be fun. And so, you know, that's why my Quetzalcoatlus breathes lightning, because why not? Or whatever, right?
I was just laughing at one of the one of the comments. No, Brian,
Sure.
you get one shield. That's it. So, as always, folks, there's links down in the description. Go check them out. Get some more monsters for your games. Final thoughts before we head on out?
You know, I will eventually convert this, and the more monsters that I have in hand, the better. And if there's a stretch goal already out there, because Steve Jackson got excited about more monsters, and so there's a stretch goal at $73,000 to do a complete conversion for the fantasy trip. And once I'm in the conversion game, I don't see a reason to stop. So I don't see why this wouldn't eventually be released in OSR and 5e formats.
Yeah. So I know that's not why we're here, but are your commissions open for shields?
Oh, sure. Although I
Nice.
would say that yes, but it was 17 degrees here this morning.
Yeah.
And I have to build them outside. So my workshop is a little shut down until spring.
Yeah, that might be a little bit of a factor. Thanks for hanging out with me today, Douglas. Thanks everyone in the chat for hanging out with us. Always, as always, links are in the description. And until next time, stay nerdy.